So yeah, I'm going to say a bit about sort of the background of Robin, give a demo of the features, and then talk a bit about what we've learned in building it and kind of our kind of growing understanding of all the challenges and sort of bits and bobs around website compliance that we can hopefully tell you about in a way that's useful. So my background is really with the Key, and alongside James, who's also on the call, we sort of started creating Robin well over a year ago, actually, when we saw this opportunity. We've both spent kind of 15 plus years building these products that help schools and school governors and school leaders with policies and compliance and governance. And so, we've done manual website checks, we've been governors, and we had a pretty good sense of some of those challenges. Yeah, it's great also to have Rebecca and Hannah on the call that you can see. And also I think our full team of engineers are here, maybe Phil and Chris and Luke. So yeah, really good to be with you. Yeah, as I said, we were very aware that school websites and policies are hard to stay on top of, and there's a lot of effort that goes into that. There's so much to keep up to date. The DfE is often changing its rules, and that can lead to kind of a challenge of keeping the quality of those up. And importantly, I'd say there's real consequences to that if policies and websites are not up to date and useful. That can have a real impact beyond compliance and Ofsted and things like that. It can have a real impact on schools' effectiveness and operations. And so it was when AI came along that we really saw that there could be a new way of doing this. And with Robin now, we've analysed, audited thousands of school websites, for our customers, and also in the kind of previews and testing we've been doing. And as we've been doing that, we have seen the reality, kind of as we expected, which is that this is a very tricky problem to stay on top of. And so, looking across the results so far, there's a couple of kind of headline stats that might be interesting. We find that about a third of school policies on websites are overdue review in terms of their stated review date. And we find that typically we find about 80% of the information that's required when we do a compliance check. So about 20% missing. And I'm sure you will work in schools and trusts, and you know school governance, so that I think those wouldn't be a surprise. It's just really hard to stay on top of this. And so there's hopefully something we can do to help you with that with Robin. And why is that the case? I mean, up until now, the only way in which it's been possible to try and stay on top of this has been by manually checking those school websites. Yeah, as I said, I've done that job. It's time consuming in a bunch of ways, actually, not just doing it, but all of the organization around it is time consuming as well. It's not necessarily that accurate, like people aren't 100% accurate. And when something is that time consuming, it often makes more sense to do it at a kind of higher level, just check the basics rather than get into the real detail. Another challenge is just the requirements are constantly changing, policies are constantly coming in and out of date, so it's not something you can just do once. And so that leads you to this kind of issue of things being siloed, where you only do this thing manually once or twice a year, and you end up with spreadsheets where those results aren't particularly usable. Finally, I know we've got lots of trusts with us, and we've been talking to loads of trust central teams about this challenge, and this is the thing I feel I've probably learned the most in the last term, which is that you might think that being a trust would make it a bit easier to manage this stuff because you've got that kind of that central team and maybe some admin capacity. Actually, it's really clear that being a trust can make this harder, not easier. You've got that growth in schools and people that just adds complexity. But also, frankly, the central teams are pretty small for the amount they're overseeing. They don't have lots of capacity for this work, and they've got two jobs now. They've got the job of the manual checks, but they've also got the job of kind of coordinating and organizing those checks and all of the changes that might be needed to the policies and the websites. So definitely not the case that being a trust makes this easier. So I think we want to do some polls, a couple of polls during this session. So we thought, firstly, it'd be really interesting to hear how you currently do your website compliance. So you should have had a poll just pop up, and it'd be really interesting for us to know, how's this done where you are, and hopefully whether you're in a school or a trust. So mostly manually checked by Matt Central staff, although another 14 where it's done at the school level. So maybe about a 50-50 split between doing it in the Matt and doing it in the school. Yeah, that's really interesting to see. We see a complete mix of this, and also seems like it's something that kind of evolves as trusts grow. I'd say from what I've seen, it's more common when trusts are smaller for it to be done centrally. And as they grow, it's more common for that to just become unsustainable, and for there to be a need to kind of get schools in some way to help with that work. And so often we talk to trusts who are growing and they're feeling that challenge. Hopefully you're not going to have to do this manually anymore, because you're going to use Robin. So I thought let's get into showing you what Robin can do. So when we run a website review with Robin, you get both a compliance check and a policy audit. Let's start with the compliance check, because that's what we've been talking about. And so, fairly obviously, Robin is checking whether each school has all of the required information. And so as a trust, first of all, you can see across the trust what the percentage of information found is for each of your schools. And so just get a full headline view of that. And this is a pretty typical distribution from a kind of demo trust of what that looks like. You can then go into an individual school and you can see the full detail of what's been checked and what's been found. So yeah, the DFE sets out about 60, 70 odd requirements per school. And it depends on the age range of the school and the phase and the provision, which requirements apply. So Robin does all of the work to map requirements to schools based on the school information, so that you're only seeing the relevant requirements. So in this example, it's a primary school. So we've got the key stage 2 performance data, for example. Scrolling down through the report, we can then see item by item what Robin has checked, where it's looked, and what it's found. And so you get the full breakdown of each of those requirement checks. To talk about that key stage 2 one I just mentioned, it's worth saying a little bit here about the way Robin works. So Robin's not doing a Google search where we're just saying, can we find something anywhere? Robin does its check in a human-like way, first selecting the sources where it's kind of logical that information would be, and then checking them to see if it's there. And so when Robin finds what it's looking for, like the first 2 examples here, you can see where that information was found. You can click on that link to open the web page, and you can see what was found in terms of what's being asked for. But when something's not found, which is kind of in some ways more useful, you can see where Robin looked and some commentary on why Robin concluded that information wasn't there. So for the other 2 items here, you can see that Robin checked a bunch of relevant pages for that information, but wasn't able to find it. There's a couple of features here just worth explaining. As you're using Robin, you can kind of interact with its results. You can add your own notes if you've got some comment you want to add, which would be shared with the other users of Robin. You can also change the judgment. So if you disagree with what Robin has kind of concluded, or you've made an edit to the website which you want to reflect in your data, you can click to change. And that will pull through to all of the headline stats. You can also give us feedback, which we really encourage you to do. You can give us a thumbs up, which just if you're feeling nice and generous, to let us know that you're impressed with what Robin's done. But also you can let us know if there's any issues with the results. So you can click thumbs down, and you can select a reason, and you can give us that feedback. And all of that feedback comes through to us, and we use it to look at that individual result, but also generally keep improving the way Robin works, so that it gets better and better. Beyond the school report, we also have a view of the compliance check by requirement. So this is where we're looking across the whole trust by requirement to see how many schools had that piece of information. And I think in many ways, this, if you're a Trust Central person, this can be the more useful view, because it gives you that kind of thematic overview of what's happening. And so you can pick up on themes that might actually be the result of the fact that schools haven't been told they have to publish something, or maybe something's missing from your standard policy or your standard kind of website template. And so to stick to this kind of key stage 2 performance example, you can see that maybe a bunch of schools haven't got that information. You can then click into that specific requirement, and you can see for each school kind of line by line what Robin concluded. And so that means you can quickly kind of spot themes. You can quickly kind of flag any schools that are maybe missing, and you can also see the results. So sometimes it can just be really useful to see, you know, what is that result for all of our schools, and you can get all of that there. So you get that view across all of the requirements for each round of compliance checks. Right, that's the headlines on the compliance checks. Let's go across to the policy audit. So at the same time as checking compliance, Robin essentially analyzes and picks up any policies that are found on each school website. So that's not just those on the policy page. It includes policies anywhere else on the website, and also any policies that are pointed to that are on the trust website. And so you can see immediately the kind of headline view of just how many policies each school has published and how many are overdue and how many are missing. And even just number of policies can be a really interesting thing to keep an eye on from a trust perspective. And different trusts have different approaches to how they manage policies, but some much more specific about what they expect. Others let schools do what they want, and you see more of a range in terms of those numbers. If we go into an example, so for each school, you can see the report on the required policies, whether they've been found and when they're due for review, but also not just those, also all of the other policies that have been found. And so for each policy, Robin reads the document. You can open the document directly by clicking on the link. You can open the page that policy is held on, and you can see the review dates that Robin has kind of read. And this is really where the AI comes in that it's the AI that allows us to read the contents of the policy, whether that date's in a table, on the front page, on the back page, whatever format it's written out in. Hopefully we can pick it up. Where a policy is overdue, it's flagged and counted. And if you want a bit more information about kind of why that conclusion's been reached, you can click here and see the detail on the analysis that Robin did for each policy. A couple of other things to pick up. Across Robin, you can view the history of your checks. So over time, as Robin's running, you'll have multiple rounds of reviews, so you can go back and look at previous reviews to compare or just to check up on that. And you can also export these school reviews, so either to a CSV or to a PDF, which is kind of a nice printout of the page as you see it when you're using the website. Okay, and last bit, categories. So just like in the compliance check where we look at requirements across the trust, there's also a view here where we look at policy categories across the trust. So here you can see for each category of policy, and Robin, it's Robin that does that categorization. So we automatically look at the kind of title and content of each policy and categorize it for you. So you can see how many schools have that policy, how many are overdue, and how many documents there are. That's really useful for required policies and also for all of the other categories of policy. Again, I think in terms of policy management, this can give you a really good sense of, what are the most common policies we're publishing, which ones maybe outliers and might need a bit of checking in terms of why schools are publishing so many or why they're publishing that particular one. And for any of these policy categories, you can click in and see the detail of school by school. What documents do they have? When are they due for review? And where are they on their websites? And so this gives you a really quick way to dig into that. This can also be really useful when, for example, rolling out a Trust Central policy. We've heard that it can be really useful to come here to check if you've got a Trust Central policy, you're expecting your schools to adapt and publish, and they should all have the same review date or they should all have the same title. This can be a really quick way to audit whether that's happening in a way that saves you the time of all of the back and forth. And I'm sure, in your schools or trusts, there'll be lots of people who are kind of specialists in particular areas like child protection or attendance, where they're really on top of that particular policy. And so they would want to go and check it. Somebody else about requirements. So yeah, specifically, we're checking for the required policies as well. And so at the top of each school report, it is the set of policies that the DFE says they must have. And these are the ones that are required to be published on the website, not just the ones that are generally kind of statutory. And as you can see here, when the school website points to the trust website and says kind of this policy is over there, that shows up, and we link to the trust website, and also the policy is included in the audit. So yeah, that's that for the demo. Gives you an overview of both the compliance check and the policy audit. I guess one thing we're really trying to do with Robin is create a tool that sort of just works, where there's not too much setup, and I'm trying to communicate that in terms of the demo. You don't need to kind of do anything for us to get Robin going. We get the school information from the DFE, get information about schools. That's also where we get the website details from. We don't particularly care like what website platform you're using or if any of that's changing. We just look at what's available on the web. And so we can get Robin going quickly for you without you having to kind of think too much about that process. And we're starting to have great feedback from the schools and trusts that are already using it. Yeah, as Bex mentioned, we are past over 40 trusts using Robin, and over 500 schools, which is great. Someone's asked that. Yeah, I nearly put that page in. Yes, so the requirements are based on the DFE guidance on what academies are required to publish or what maintained schools are required to publish. And we're not shy about pricing, and you might be wondering about it, so I thought we'll just share it up front. So we have a few different options. We do offer a one-off check, which is definitely an option. We found with trusts really that are trying to change their system and get those long-term benefits, that they are taking the tracker options. So we've got two tracker options, a half-termly and a monthly. So that's having Robin run 6 times a year or 12 times a year. And each run includes the compliance check, the policy audit, and all of the kind of headline pages and everything I just showed you. We also offer a 10% discount for trusts that are signing up at the moment. And so when we follow up, we can get you a quote and you can see the specific price, but that gives you an idea of the cost. So having done a bit of a demo and got you thinking a bit about the challenges of website compliance, it'd be really interesting to hear what your biggest challenges are. This would be really interesting research for us. There's lots of things that school websites and policies kind of relate to. It'd be really valuable to understand. It might be interesting to share which ones of these, and it's like we're forcing you to pick one. I'm sure they're all challenges, but is it the general quality of your websites for parents? Is it Ofsted? Is it compliance in general? With trusts, I know there's kind of trust zone expectations. Is policy management actually more of a challenge, or is it just the time this takes? This is really interesting. I don't know what I was expecting here. Maybe I was expecting Ofsted to be higher. I'm kind of glad it isn't. Maybe time burden suggests that people think the work's valuable. It's just the fact it takes so long. So also just thought it'd be interesting in this session to share a bit about what we've learned. I mean, we're checking lots of websites and learning a lot about this topic. And so there's a few themes we picked up that I thought we could share. The first one, yeah, there are a lot of policies. So we had a look at this last year. Yeah, the average is kind of in that 30-ish. But also what was really interesting was the range. I mean, we did find one school that had 170, they really did have 170 policy documents on their website. But it's pretty common to see the kind of 60, 70, 80, 90. And I'm not sure that, what the right number is, but it's interesting to see that. And certainly we're hearing, especially from trusts, that one thing they're hoping Robin can help them with is kind of rationalizing and consolidating policies. Another thing we're finding is there are quite common gaps in the compliance check, and hopefully this might be useful just as a takeaway for something you could have a look at, or obviously use Robin to help with. But there are things that are more often missing than others. Total school open time in a typical week is one of the more common ones that we see is missing. It's very natural for a school to publish its opening hours, but there's a separate requirement to publish the total open time, which came in, I think, a couple of years ago around COVID, when there was a bit of a kind of scrutiny going on around kind of flexible hours of schooling and a bit of a clamp down on that. And so that's one to watch out for. Contact details of the Senko, I think probably a more meaningful one that we sometimes struggle to find. the name of the Senko is often there, often on the staff page or in the information report, but sometimes the contact details are not clear. And I think if you're a parent who has a child with a special educational need, that being able, or you're thinking of coming to that school, being able to easily get in touch with the Senko is really important. And also, performance data items. I'll talk about this in a second, but we are seeing that those are there's quite a few gaps there. As you've seen, Robin can kind of really help you pick up on this in your trust. So this was an example from a trust of this kind of typical result we see on opening hours, where the school opening hours are there, but the total open time isn't always. It also became a new requirement that exactly how long you should be open for. And so you can obviously check that in Robin. With performance data, what we're often seeing is some schools, I think that they just have to link to the DFE page for performance data and don't have to publish any results themselves. But the requirements actually say that schools should publish a specific subset of those results on their website. So you should have both the link to your results on the DFE page and then also this subset of results. And then the other tricky thing here is obviously those change over time. So in December, the 2024 results for Key Stage 2 and 4 were published. And so then the expectation is that you update that subset on your school websites. And so again, we're kind of seeing this pattern where, I mean, to be honest, sometimes the link isn't always there, but more often than not, even if the link is there might not be those particular results that the DFE asks schools to publish. Another challenge we're seeing is actually just the amount of older information on school websites. And there's a mix of these, and I'm sure anyone here who manages school websites will kind of be aware of this. Definitely see quite a few issues with previous versions of policies being up, or just policies that people thought they had got rid of, but they hadn't. They've just removed them from the policies page, but maybe it's still somewhere else. Out-of-date staff details. When we check the name of the Senko or the name of the head teacher, sometimes you see multiple names, for example, or when people look at those results, they go, "Oh, wait a minute, that person actually moved on in the summer, and the website hasn't been updated." And the same can apply to governors, and that scenario where I know there can be a bit of scrutiny in terms of making sure your governor details are up to date, in terms of making sure they match what's on GS. And so Robin can help you pick that up. Finally, a thing we quite often see is that, especially for schools that have recently academized, they still have information that kind of suggests they're a maintained school, or they have information, they haven't put in the new information they're required to have, having become an academy. And so, as I said, like the compliance check is a bit different for a maintained school and academy. So when that school academizes and we run the academy kind of check, it will often pick up things that aren't there. Yeah, Ruth, I agree, but that's the requirement as we understand it. Yeah, and just to give an example, because it feels like quite an important one, this thing of older policies, this is a very typical pattern we see. So maybe the policies page has the most recent version of the document, but there's another page somewhere on the website that has an older version that has been missed. And so in this case, like that's on the contact us page. So, there's a real risk here that a parent wanting to contact the school about a complaint would go to the wrong policy and make the complaint kind of having read that. And there's a few areas, complaints, attendance, and behavior in particular, where we've heard about the DFE as well, sending these letters seeking assurances that policies are up to date. And also, I mean, there's just a real challenge in the system at the moment about the number of complaints that schools are receiving. And so anything you can do to avoid a complaint being made against kind of the wrong policy is obviously going to help. And so that's a quick thing that if you have, Robin, check your websites, you can go and check your policy category for complaints and just have a look through and make sure there's no old ones there. There's also a few things which, I mean, I've mentioned performance data that just came in, which we're checking just because these things change over time. So at the end of December, the new pupil premium statements became required. And so that's something which, you have to stay on top of. And again, you can do that in Robin. So you can go to that section and you can see, and often we are seeing that actually, I think schools have been pretty good from what I've seen in terms of getting those pupil premium statements up in December. But naturally, some haven't been able to do that, or it's slipped. And so it's really useful to be able to go in and quickly check as new requirements come around, whether that information is there. And yeah, as I said, there seems to quite often be these gaps in that performance data. And so especially as the new dates come around, you can there's quite a lot to stay on top of. We have a blog post on the Robin website just with the annual calendar of when changes come in, and that might be a useful reference point. Whether you're using Robin or not, that might be useful in terms of just being aware of everything that's going on. And one last thing here, thinking a bit going forward about the things we're hearing about. I think it's quite interesting what's happening with school uniform policy. So you might have seen in the schools bill that there's a change coming, if that goes through, to limit the number of branded items that you're allowed to have in a school uniform policy. And so, I mean, the expectation is that will come in at some point, and that will mean every school having to make sure they comply with that. Also, actually, in the autumn term, the DfE changed the guidance on its webpage for what's required to make this final one here a kind of separate bullet point about including information about where secondhand uniform can be purchased. And we've seen that actually that's one which those policies are more likely to be missing. And so we're already checking that. We're also already checking whether there is information about branded items, so you can kind of get on top of those, but it might be one to get ahead of, because actually changing uniform, changing supplier, sorting all that out could take quite a bit of time if that new law comes in. Okay, last up before we get on to questions, a few people coming in were asking about the roadmap for Robin. So again, just like with pricing, we try and work as publicly as possible with Robin. So we've got on our help center, which anyone can access, our roadmap, where you can go and have a look at what we're working on, what we've recently completed, and what we're thinking about. And so we update that regularly, and that is really driven by people using Robin and telling us what we can do to help them. The main kind of bigger thing that we're working on, hopefully to come next, is a trust website check. So that is a compliance check of the trust website specifically for the things that has to contain. And that's quite a big check, actually. There's the things, it's not just a couple of things, I've listed them on the right. There's a whole bunch of things that are required of the trust website. And so we're planning to work on that in the kind of spring, summer, to hopefully get that out to all our users. And we'll do what we've done before with kind of new pieces of work, which is probably, share early and get a first version that we can get feedback on. But we've definitely heard from trusts that they're really keen to have that trust website check alongside the school one. Beyond that, there's a whole bunch of interesting things which we're thinking about and exploring. Custom requirements where schools or trusts want Robin to check something else. Accessibility checks is coming up quite often in terms of that challenge of website quality and accessibility. Also just other areas of compliance. We're doing this broad check of the DfE's school website requirements, but there's specific guidance on things like behavior policies or admissions arrangements where we could go into much more. We could go through the detail of the specific area, and so that's another one we're exploring. If there's anything else, feel free to throw into the chat. But the plan at the moment is to do the trust website check, and then from there we'll have learned more and be thinking about those really interesting things we could do next. All right. Oh, we're not doing too badly for time. So I think we're going to move on to questions. I haven't seen them at all, so I'm intrigued.
It's all right, Joe. I will fill you in. So we've got a couple of questions around sort of how Robin runs. So one question is, will you notify trusts if requirements change? And another one is, do you have to manually start a check, or is it regularly checking in the background to alert you of any non-compliance? Sort of two similar ones there.
Yeah, great. Okay, I'll go second one first. So Robin runs on a schedule. So as I said, if you sign up to a sort of half-termly or a monthly tracker, we schedule those reviews for you, and you can kind of flex the dates in terms of how you'd like them. So we have a default plan. Here's when it would normally run, and then you can say, actually, we'd like to flex that because of when our board meetings are or something. And so when that's set up, you don't have to do anything. You can see within Robin when those reviews are coming, and when we complete a review, we notify you to let you know of the result, and you can just go into the app and see them. We update kind of the way Robin works anytime the DFE makes changes to its requirements. And so, that doesn't happen very regularly, maybe once a term or something. They might tweak the wording or introduce something new, like, if they introduced that school uniform thing. So we'd update Robin straight away, and then you would see those results in your next check. And so you can kind of each time Robin runs, you get a fresh check with the current guidance. If something more radical changes, if the DFE brought something in that we thought we really wanted to check for everyone, we could act on that quicker. And we're also working on the kind of audit, so you can see over time kind of how your compliance or how your policies have changed over time as those checks run regularly.
Brilliant, thanks, Joe. A couple of questions there on sort of how Robin works. So I know we sort of touched on the DFE pages around, what schools should publish on their website. And there are a few questions that sort of touch on that a little bit more. Sarah saying that there are a few requirements that are missing on those pages, so you might have to check elsewhere. And someone asked, is the compliance check based only on the DFE guidance?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I mean, the list of things you could check if you followed the path to the underlying legislation and then the related legislation is huge. So yeah, at the moment we are sticking tightly to that specific page that the FE publishes on what academies or maintained schools are required to publish online. And so where that guidance goes into detail, we do the same. So I could show you an example maybe, but for example, on admissions arrangements, the guidance goes into the detail of the specific underlying elements that have to be there. So it doesn't just say you have to have admissions arrangements, it says you have to have them for the specific year that's currently required, and you need to show your PAN and a bunch of other things. So because those things are listed specifically on the DFE page, we break them down within the report. But in other areas like behavior, the DFE page just says you have to have a behavior policy, so we just check that level. Now, we'd love, as I said, to go into the detail of the underlying requirements of a behavior policy. We're just not doing that quite yet.
Great, and that sort of answers Ruth's question about, does Robin check content for compliance? So yes, in a sort of way where specific content needs to be checked as per the DFE's page, we will, but not sort of everything of every content of every policy, if you like. A really good question here is, how long does it take to get Robin set up?
It's just a click of a button. So yeah, pretty quick. I mean, we as I said, we don't need any information from you as long as your information is up to date on getting information about schools. Sometimes there's maybe information missing there that we'll ask you to update. And then we can get Robin going. We're busy at the moment scheduling lots of the trusts that are joining. So typically, if you joined, we would ask you when you wanted your first run to be, maybe like the same week or the week after, and we would schedule that for you so it could run. And then maybe this is not what they were asking, but it's quite interesting. An actual Robin compliance check, in terms of once we kind of schedule or trigger a check, it takes Robin about 20 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes to do that complete compliance check and policy audit for a school. And so, I mean, that's pretty magical if you've done it manually, you know how long that can take. And so that means we can kind of trigger, for example, a whole trust overnight and have all those results ready for you when you come, for the start of the day.
Brilliant. There is a question here that's had a couple of upvotes, but I feel like it's going to be opening a bit of a can of worms if we go into it. I don't know if you can see it, Joe. It's the one about rationalising policies and sort of minimising the total number of policies that a school has.
Yeah, well, I can answer that. Maybe we finish on that one. We're not going to have time for all the questions, I don't think, but maybe we can do this one. Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely something we're hearing that people are doing. And I think there's a couple of things there. The first thing is just which policies are people publishing, and getting a grip of that. And this kind of view of all of the different categories of policy and how many of them are being published there's probably some low-hanging fruit there around why has one school or two schools got this policy when all the others don't. Maybe it helps you spot overlap. And also then the number of documents. If you can see, on attendance, we've got 22 schools, but we've got 35 documents. It can just help you do that audit of the kind of state of play at the moment. And then as you roll those kind of new policies out, hopefully it can help you easily see that's happening. That said, we have got some interesting ideas because people have been talking to us about things like policy comparison, policy consistency. I think there's all sorts of potential to kind of analyze at a deeper level than we are at the moment. But yeah, at the moment we're just sticking to the sort of headline compliance check and policy audit as the first thing we're supporting.
Brilliant, thank you. If there are any other questions, we can leave those and answer them separately. Thanks everyone for your questions.
Brilliant. I think I'm going to hand over to Victor, but thanks everyone. I hope that was really interesting. And yeah, over to you. Thanks.
Great, thanks so much, Joe. So, as Joe just said, if you did like what you see and you're ready to get started, you want to stop doing those manual checks and feel confident your website's compliant all year round, you can buy now on our website. We've now, I think, Joe mentioned over 40 mats and 500 schools already on Robin. We're busy this week setting up more, so they're ready for February. So if you're a mat, you get that 10% discount. We can send you a quote with all the information, whether you wanted a half-termly check or a monthly check, or you can just buy straight away online. If you are a school or a SAT, you can also just buy online now, and we can get Robin set up for you straight away, maybe even this week. So tomorrow in the follow-up email, I'll share the recording with you. If you are a mat and you'd like to see a free preview, you might have already had details for that, but I'll remind you of the login and how you can get into that free preview for one school in your trust. And I'll also share some helpful links with FAQs, any questions we've not managed to answer, Joe's compliance calendar, and the roadmap. So yeah, thank you so much for coming. When this webinar ends, you'll have a feedback form. If you can fill that out, that would be fantastic. And yeah, just email us as well, hello@robin.education, if there's anything else you need to know. So thank you so much for attending.